We only get to do this 4 times a year, and I'm actually starting to look forward to these now. If you couldn't figure out from the title of this video, everyone's favorite racing sim developer Motorsport Games held their second quarter 2022 investor relations call this afternoon. Let me get to the good stuff right away. The company is down to their last $3.8 million. With the company burning $1.2 to $1.4 million per month, these guys might not even last long enough to release the NASCAR 21 expansion pack with the 2022 cars. And just like their other quarterly investor calls that I've profiled on my channel over the past year, they repeat the same line over and over again about evaluating new sources of funding, but they haven't actually found anyone to fund them yet, so they just keep running out of money. Their list of second quarter accomplishments is equally embarrassing. All they can really say is that they added 4K support to NASCAR 21 Ignition, a game nobody's playing, and released some DLC for R Factor 2. Only us sim racers will really understand the absurdity of this, but a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ is holding quarterly investor calls to tell their investors that they released a handful of R Factor mods. The call was extremely short, and as a result, there's no details on the upcoming Nintendo Switch game called NASCAR Rivals. There were no details on the NASCAR 21 2022 expansion pack, and there were no details on NASCAR 23, which the team aims to release next summer. Instead, they spoke pretty cryptically about the roadmap, saying, hey, based on the cash we have on hand, we'll adjust our roadmap as necessary, which in short means, hey, if we don't have enough money to make a game, we're not going to make the game. This call has only strengthened my opinion that this company is both a scam, as well as Dmitry Kozko, the CEO of Motorsport Games, is a scam artist that has been hiding in plain sight for the past 15 years, dating back to his involvement with a company called Net Element. I've listened to 4 or 5 of these quarterly investor calls in full over the past year and some change, just as an average Joe watching this all play out in front of me. What bothers me the most about Motorsport Games, and by proxy Dmitry Kozko, is the sheer amount of lying by omission that they do at pretty much every given opportunity. Every announcement these guys put out, every interview Dmitry Kozko does with the media, and every quarterly investor call, the full story on every single talking point is routinely just never told. In my opinion, these guys are habitual bullshit artists. And this is something they've done from the very beginning, continuing to present day. Consider the list on your screen. I know it's a bit claustrophobic to read your cheat sheet. If you're by chance an investor in this company and you happen to come across this video, this is what you need to take a screenshot of. Going all the way back to the beginning, when this company first announced they'd be using R Factor 2 tech to power their line of upcoming racing sims, as well as eventually take over Studio 397, they never actually mentioned how R Factor 2 has pretty serious underlying problems and that most of the sim racing community had actually abandoned it several years earlier. They essentially purchased outdated technology that most people had moved on from and then bragged about it, and then hoped the investors just wouldn't notice. They've also never addressed how exclusive licenses mean jack shit in this day and age, and people are playing NASCAR, IndyCar, BTCC, and Le Mans cars across a variety of other racing sims, and they're perfectly happy with it. Take NASCAR for example. As much as it pains me to say it, there really hasn't been a need for a dedicated boxed NASCAR game over the past decade. Everyone who's been interested in playing NASCAR on the computer has simply signed up for iRacing. If you're an IndyCar fan, you've again signed up for iRacing, or purchased a payware IndyCar mod for Assetto Corsa, or bought the fictional Formula US car for Race Room. With touring cars, GT cars, and prototypes, the market is even more oversaturated. Pretty much every racing sim on the market today has these cars available in the game, including Le Mans, whether it be a paid piece of content like it is in iRacing, or a free mod that you can just download and put in the game. The point I'm trying to make is that this team artificially inflated their value by signing all these exclusive licensing agreements when it literally didn't matter, because that's not how the sim racing industry even works, and then bragged about it to their investors as if it was a big deal. They literally brag about having the official IndyCar license when you can right now go and drive a modern IndyCar in like 5 other racing sims. It's pretty mind-blowing that nobody has caught this yet. Moving on down the list, you'll notice in PR announcements they'll often describe themselves as a leading sim racer developer and esports provider, but there's actually no metric or like official list to judge this, so it's just vague nonsense they use to talk about themselves. So for the outsiders watching this because you got linked this video, the objective leaders in the sim racing landscape for the past decade have been 2 teams, iRacing and Kuno Simulazione. You could potentially throw Polyphony Digital, Turn 10 Studios, as well as Slightly Mad Studios into this mix just based on raw sales data, but the point being, a developer describing themselves in this fashion when they've only put out one failed NASCAR project that has a mostly negative review average on Steam is a big set of balls. Continuing on down the list, they pretend putting out DLC for R Factor 2 on a quarterly basis is a big deal and worth talking about during investor calls, but it's really not, because anyone can put out content for R Factor 2 on any day of the week because the game is a modding platform. They seemed really proud of releasing BTCC and IndyCars for the game this year, but they failed to mention that there were already pretty decent BTCC and IndyCar mods available on the game's Steam workshop, including a really good payware IndyCar mod. They really don't talk about how they're essentially getting outdone by what remains of their own community. Nor do they talk about how many people are actually buying this content, which rolls into the next talking point. They both pretend R Factor 2 is their own game and they're super proud of it when they really had nothing to do with it, and they also never mention how R Factor 2 is just not that popular. Motorsport games often brag a lot about how they plan to support R Factor 2 for years to come and keep rolling out quality of life improvements as well as new pieces of content. But these updates and pieces of content are often released to crickets chirping because most sim racers want nothing to do with R Factor 2, and the majority of the community splits their time between iRacing, Assetto Corsa, and ACC. Even Race Room, which is KW Suspension's passion project and has traditionally struggled with an active player count, has a pretty healthy online ranked racing scene. R Factor 2 isn't privy to that luxury. On the official Studio 397 forum, for example, there's a thread open where people are complaining just how few people have entered R Factor 2's ranked races, which they spent several years developing infrastructure for. This is never actually mentioned during investor calls or acknowledged by the company. They'll also proudly talk about their Formula Pro series, but never mention how awful the YouTube view counts are. This video will have probably 10 times the amount of view counts that their own esports competitions get. Hiding this kind of info also extends to NASCAR 21 Ignition, as you can probably guess. Every gamer knows that stuff like Steam charts exists, and we can go right now and look up and see that literally 10 people are playing NASCAR 21 Ignition worldwide. Motorsport games have just never relayed this to investors, and that this is quite a serious problem. Instead, they hype up roadmaps and expansion packs and the recently released 4K patch, without telling the other side of the story that nobody's playing them. It gives off the appearance that everything's just business as usual at the gaming studio, but it's not, because nobody's actually playing their game, and they're just pumping out future plans and patches and content into a void. When it comes to how the game's been received, Dimitri has never mentioned that the Steam rating hasn't budged after the number of patches they've released, and it wasn't just technical bugs that pissed off fans, it was the number of missing features in the game. As for the big stuff, the Sports Gamers Online article that chronicles how much of a dumpster fire the company is, and the current lawsuit against them for violating fiduciary duties, these topics have never come up in investor calls either. Each call ends with a Q&A period where you can just bullshit with Dimitri, and instead of grilling him on what I think are pretty noteworthy topics, instead they throw softball questions at him like, what is the schedule for the next year, or how did the war in Ukraine affect development? In my opinion, the investors are equally to blame for this predicament because it seems pretty much no due diligence was done at all. Even just private individuals who have a couple grand in this company, such as this guy on StockTwits right here, are too stupid to figure out that a screenshot of R Factor 2 is indeed R Factor 2, and here he's speculating that this obvious picture of R Factor 2 could possibly be the next IndyCar game. Motorsport Games, it appears, has essentially preyed on these people since day zero, and that's how they've gotten as far as they have, but according to recent reviews on Glassdoor, this might not last much longer. A review of Motorsport Games from apparently their former licensing manager, published July 21st, 2022, so earlier this summer, said some team members are awesome to work with, but it's otherwise a super toxic place to work, and that senior management has steered this company to the ground by facilitating misleading of the company by incompetent people. The company is also bleeding money and continues to spend like there is no tomorrow. Managers are hiring people when the company is going bankrupt. If you are considering working here, do not. Research the company and the financial performance of the business. This place is a trap. Another review written on June 4th, 2022 says, the company has severe money problems and it's hard to see a future with the current leadership. It's not hard to figure out where this company is going.